Hey everyone, welcome to my channel where the strange, the unexplained, and the downright creepy come to life. From real-life encounters with the paranormal to bizarre, true stories that'll keep you up at night, I bring you the eerie tales you won't hear anywhere else. If you're into late-night chills, mysterious happenings, and things that go bump in the night, you're in the right place. Subscribe, buckle up, and let's dive into the unknown. The Watchers. It started with a simple visit. I stepped into Mr. Chapman's living room, expecting maybe some tea, a chat about the neighborhood. What I found instead was something I'd never imagined. The walls were lined with small, black and white monitors, every single screen showing a different view of my house. My stomach turned as the realization hit me. He had hidden cameras everywhere. He had been watching me, recording me, studying me. My privacy wasn't just violated, it had been obliterated. "Don't bother running," Mr. Chapman said calmly, as if reading my mind. "We already know where you'll go." A cold chill swept over me. This wasn't just a lonely old man with a strange obsession. This was something far more sinister, and I was already too deep in it. I tried to back away, but my legs felt like lead. Each monitor showed a different part of my house, my porch, my living room, my hallway. It was as if he'd been inside without me ever knowing. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling. I needed answers, needed to understand what would drive someone to such madness. Mr. Chapman tilted his head, almost thoughtfully. "We do it for the greater good," he said softly. "There's darkness inside everyone, Elise. You just haven't been forced to face yours yet." "I'm not like you," I stammered. "I'm not a criminal." He laughed, cold and hollow. "You've already crossed the line. You just don't see it yet. But you will. I'll make you see it." I shook my head in disbelief. I was just a teacher. I didn't have secrets. I didn't hurt people. But in his eyes, that didn't matter. It never would. Panic rising, I backed toward the door. "I'm calling the police," I said, fumbling for my phone, more to reassure myself than to warn him. But before I could even unlock the screen, Mr. Chapman lunged forward, surprisingly fast. His hand clamped around my wrist with crushing force. His frail frame hid strength that shouldn't have been possible. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. "You think the police will help? You'll disappear, and no one will care." I twisted, desperate to break free. Then a thought struck me. Mrs. Harper, my neighbor across the street. She was always home. If I could just reach her. With a surge of adrenaline, I yanked my arm free and bolted out the door. The night air was thick with dread. I sprinted down the street, heart hammering, breath ragged. But I could feel it. Someone was behind me, watching, closing in. I didn't stop. Mrs. Harper's porch light was just ahead when I saw movement. A figure stepped into my path. A tall man in a dark coat and mask. I skidded to a halt, frozen in fear. A knife gleamed in his hand. They were everywhere. Just as he lunged, a crash rang out behind me, followed by sirens. The police. Somehow, miraculously, they were here. Mr. Chapman's expression flickered from smugness to panic. The masked man hesitated. I didn't wait. I ran. Epilogue. Later, when the police searched Mr. Chapman's house, they found a hidden attic room filled with files, meticulously cataloged records of sins, secrets, and surveillance footage from countless victims. He wasn't working alone. He was part of a secret group called the Watchers, self-proclaimed moral arbiters, punishing people for supposed sins based on a twisted code. They had been hiding in plain sight, but now they were exposed. Mr. Chapman was arrested. His home sealed off. The group fractured. But even as I watched him being taken away, I knew the damage was done. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, it would never fully go away. But for now I was free, and that had to be enough. The woman in the closet. It started with something small, a carton of eggs. I lived alone. No roommates, no girlfriend, no one with a key. Yet, one morning, I opened the fridge and found 3 eggs missing. I was certain they had been there the night before. At first, I chalked it up to stress or forgetfulness. But then it happened again. More food gone. Items rearranged. It didn't add up. The unease grew into full-blown paranoia. What if someone had a key? What if someone was entering my apartment while I was at work? To be sure, I bought a cheap security camera and installed it discreetly in the corner of the living room, just to see. For a few days, nothing happened. The camera caught no movement, no intruders, but the food kept disappearing. So one night, after noticing more things out of place, I decided to review the footage again. And that's when I saw her. At first, it looked like a shadow, some distortion in the grainy video. But as I watched more closely, my blood ran cold. It was a woman. She crawled out of my closet on all fours. Her limbs twisted unnaturally, like she hadn't stood up in days. She moved slowly, deliberately, pushing the closet door open and slithering into the apartment. Then she stood up. Silent, barefoot, and pale, she walked to the fridge, opened it and began eating. Not hurriedly, calmly, like she'd done this many times before. When she was done, she crawled back into the closet and shut the door behind her. I was frozen. My heart pounded. My brain refused to believe what I had just seen. There was someone, an actual person, living in my closet. How long had she been there? Days? Weeks? I called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the footage. They didn't laugh. They didn't doubt. They entered the apartment cautiously. When they opened the closet, she was still in there, hunched in the corner, staring blankly at the floor. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. Just sat there like a ghost caught in daylight. They told me she'd been doing this for a while, breaking into homes and hiding in closets, attics, crawl spaces, living unnoticed for as long as she could. I moved out a week later. I couldn't sleep after that. Every creak in the night reminded me of her. Silent, creeping, always watching. My home hadn't been mine. Not really. 2. The dorm during winter break. My first winter break in college, I stayed behind in the dorms. Alone. When people asked why I wasn't going home, I dodged the question. Just needed some peace and quiet, I'd say. Got some catching up to do. But the truth was heavier than casual conversation could carry. Home wasn't safe. My father's anger often exploded into fists, and my mother, drowning in depression, was barely there at all. Home was a house filled with shouting, slammed doors, and days spent hiding. Starting in high school, it got worse. Boys at school called me slurs, whispered lies, said I stared at them in the locker room. I'd go days without speaking to anyone. I kept telling myself, college will be different. I'll be free. And for a while I believed it. But when winter break came, the dorms emptied. The laughter and chaos of student life faded into silence. It was just me, a few staff members, and the wind howling outside the frosted windows. At first I welcomed the stillness. No yelling, no insults, just quiet. But then the silence turned heavy, oppressive. I spent most days alone in my room, bundled in blankets, trying not to remember. At night, memories clawed their way back. My father's voice, the slamming of drawers, the shame, the fear. Freedom didn't feel the way I thought it would. Felt like drifting, but it was still better than the alternative. I learned something important that break, not just about survival but about the cost of peace. It's not always joy that comes when you finally escape. Sometimes it's just the chance to breathe without flinching. And for me, that was enough for now. The woman in the closet. It started with something small, a carton of eggs. I lived alone. No roommates. No girlfriend. No one with a key. Yet, one morning, I opened the fridge and found 3 eggs missing. I was certain they had been there the night before. At first, I chalked it up to stress or forgetfulness. But then it happened again. More food gone. Items rearranged. It didn't add up. The unease grew into full-blown paranoia. What if someone had a key? What if someone was entering my apartment while I was at work? To be sure, I bought a cheap security camera and installed it discreetly in the corner of the living room, just to see. For a few days, nothing happened. The camera caught no movement, no intruders, but the food kept disappearing. So one night, after noticing more things out of place, I decided to review the footage again. And that's when I saw her. At first, it looked like a shadow, some distortion in the grainy video. But as I watched more closely, my blood ran cold. It was a woman. She crawled out of my closet on all fours. Her limbs twisted unnaturally, like she hadn't stood up in days. She moved slowly, deliberately, pushing the closet door open and slithering into the apartment. Then she stood up. Silent, barefoot, and pale, she walked to the fridge, opened it and began eating. Not hurriedly, calmly, like she'd done this many times before. When she was done, she crawled back into the closet and shut the door behind her. I was frozen. My heart pounded. My brain refused to believe what I had just seen. There was someone, an actual person, living in my closet. How long had she been there? Days? Weeks? I called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the footage. They didn't laugh. They didn't doubt. They entered the apartment cautiously. When they opened the closet, she was still in there, hunched in the corner, staring blankly at the floor. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. Just sat there like a ghost caught in daylight. They told me she'd been doing this for a while, breaking into homes and hiding in closets, attics, crawl spaces, living unnoticed for as long as she could. I moved out a week later. I couldn't sleep after that. Every creak in the night reminded me of her. Silent, creeping, always watching. My home hadn't been mine. Not really. 2. The dorm during winter break. My first winter break in college, I stayed behind in the dorms. Alone. When people asked why I wasn't going home, I dodged the question. Just needed some peace and quiet, I'd say. Got some catching up to do. But the truth was heavier than casual conversation could carry. Home wasn't safe. My father's anger often exploded into fists, and my mother, drowning in depression, was barely there at all. Home was a house filled with shouting, slammed doors, and days spent hiding. Starting in high school, it got worse. Boys at school called me slurs, whispered lies, said I stared at them in the locker room. I'd go days without speaking to anyone. I kept telling myself, college will be different. I'll be free. And for a while, I believed it. But when winter break came, the dorms emptied. The laughter and chaos of student life faded into silence. It was just me, a few staff members, and the wind howling outside the frosted windows. At first, I welcomed the stillness. No yelling, no insults, just quiet. But then the silence turned heavy, oppressive. I spent most days alone in my room, bundled in blankets, trying not to remember. At night, memories clawed their way back. My father's voice, the slamming of drawers, the shame, the fear. Freedom didn't feel the way I thought it would. Felt like drifting, but it was still better than the alternative. I learned something important that break, not just about survival but about the cost of peace. It's not always joy that comes when you finally escape. Sometimes it's just the chance to breathe without flinching. And for me, that was enough for now. Christmas alone. I moved clear across the country for college, desperate to leave my past behind. I thought distance would bring freedom, maybe even happiness. What I hadn't accounted for was the loneliness. I didn't know anyone. Reaching out felt impossible, like a mountain I wasn't strong enough to climb. I kept everything bottled inside, not because I wanted to, but because that's how I had learned to survive. By Thursday of the first week, I was in the hospital for alcohol poisoning. I had barely started college and already I had broken. College, the place I'd fantasized about for years, was supposed to be a sanctuary. Instead, it was just another space where I couldn't breathe. Back home, I'd learned to numb the pain, to push my feelings aside and keep moving. That's what strong people did, right? But college didn't have the same routine or guardrails. Without them, I flailed. And when the pain became unbearable, I drank. I drank until I passed out cold on the bathroom floor and woke up in a hospital bed. My clothes were torn. I reeked of vomit. It should have been a turning point. It wasn't. The weeks after the hospital were a blur of depression and silence. I passed my classes barely, but the magic was gone. Back at my inner-city high school, I was a star student, effortless A's, praise from teachers. But here, everyone had been that student. I suddenly felt small, average, unremarkable. And then money became an issue. I struggled to afford my books, my food, everything. The pressure built up, and once again I turned to drinking. If I couldn't feel happy, at least I could feel nothing. When winter break rolled around, I knew I couldn't go home. That place wasn't a refuge. So I stayed. One by one, friends left campus, waving goodbye with luggage in hand. By mid-December, the dorms were a ghost town. First, I kept busy. I went to the gym, snuck into classrooms to watch Oscar contenders on big screens. My student ID got me into museums for free, so I roamed exhibits like a lone tourist. I filled my days with distractions so I wouldn't have to think. But every night, I returned to an empty room. And every night, I poured myself a drink from the whiskey bottle hidden in my bottom desk drawer. The silence hit hardest then. I managed until Christmas Eve. That night, everything was closed. The storm outside raged like it had a personal vendetta, trapping me in my dorm. I tried to fill the hours, video games, TV, scavenging sad snacks from the mini-fridge. But by mid-afternoon, boredom turned to something heavier. Loneliness hit me like a freight train. With nowhere to run and nothing to distract me, I was left alone with my thoughts, and they devoured me. I panicked, spiraling inward. Like always, I reached for the bottle. I poured the whiskey into a sticky plastic cup I'd used too many times before. For a moment, I hesitated. I knew what I was doing. I knew why. But I drank anyway. And drank. And drank. The next thing I remember was waking up on my bed to the sound of knocking. I had no idea how long I'd been out. I didn't even remember getting into bed. My mouth was dry, my body weak. I staggered toward the trash can and threw up. Dry heaves that felt like knives. It didn't help. I was still drunk. Still sick. Then came another knock. "Who is it?" I croaked. Maybe it was someone from housing, security, or a custodian checking on me. No response. "Who is it?" I asked again, louder this time. Silence. I couldn't breathe properly. It felt like my lungs were compressed, like my entire body had been wrung out and left hollow. My muscles were weak and unresponsive, like gelatin, and I had to use the bed frame to prop myself upright. From that angle, I saw it. A shadow cast beneath my dorm door, legs firmly planted just beyond the frame. Someone was standing there. I called out, slurring, "I can see your shadow, you know." The reply came instantly. "Good." I froze, paralyzed. The voice didn't come from the hallway. It came from everywhere. It was as though the air itself spoke, as if I'd been submerged in a lake and the sound came from the water around me. My eyes darted around the room, expecting to see someone, anyone. But I was alone. The shadow still lingered at the door, unmoving. In a sudden burst of desperation or drunken bravery, I launched myself at the door, twisted the knob, and flung it open. No one. I blinked, almost expecting the absence. But then slam. A door shut down the hallway. I turned and saw a handle mid-motion, retracting to its default position. Fueled by some strange conviction, I grabbed my ID and staggered toward that door. My gait was clumsy, unsteady. The hallway seemed unnaturally long, stretched by something unseen. When I finally reached the door, I read the nameplate. Colby. He was an international student. No way he'd returned to campus this early. Still, I knocked. Hard. "Colby. What the hell, man? Open up." No answer. My knocking turned into pounding. "I know you're in there. Quit messing with me." But then, my fist met air. Suddenly, I wasn't standing outside Colby's door. I was standing inside my own room. I didn't remember using my key, and yet here I was. Which was impossible. Our dorms lock automatically. You can't get in without swiping your ID. Worse, I turned and saw my actual room still further down the hallway. But this room, Colby's room, was identical to mine. Same posters, same mess, same bed, same blue sheets. And in that bed, under the covers, was the shape of a body curled into the fetal position. It was crying, and it sounded like me. My legs moved on their own, guiding me toward the bed. The crying lump shifted under the blankets. I reached out, trembling, to pull back the covers, only for them to rise to meet my hands. The body was no longer resting. It was floating, It unfurled, lying flat as if in a coffin, suspended in midair. And then, it screamed. A sound so raw, so tortured, it pierced me to my core. I clutched my ears, but the scream wasn't just coming from it. It came from everywhere, just like the voice before. Then silence. Tears streamed down my face. My body trembled with fear and nausea. I expected the figure to collapse back onto the bed. But instead, the entire room lifted. Bed, desk, dresser, clothes. Everything rose and slammed into the ceiling as if the world had flipped upside down. Yet I remained on the floor. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I bolted. As I fled, the door slammed shut behind me. The motion made me so dizzy, so violently nauseous, that I threw up in the hallway outside. My stomach emptied everything. Fear, confusion, liquor, onto the carpet. I looked to the right. My room, the real one, waited for me, just a few feet more. Then the lights at the far end of the hall flickered out. One set at a time. Darkness crept toward me, devouring the corridor. I forced myself to move. My legs ached. My lungs burned. The lights shut off faster now, closer, closer, closer. I reached my door and fumbled for my ID. It wasn't in my pocket. Panic surged. Did I leave it in Colby's room? Did I drop it? The darkness sprinted toward me. Finally, I found it in my back pocket. I swiped, flung open the door, and dove inside. The door closed slowly behind me, but not before I looked back, and saw him. His figure stood in the dark hall, darker than the shadows themselves. The shape was human in outline, but his eyes were not. The whites of his irises shone unnaturally bright, glowing silver veins stretching outward from blackened sclera. His gaze pierced something beyond me, something ancient. And in that gaze, just for a moment, I felt the weight of eons. I couldn't stop shaking. It felt like my lungs were compressed, my body barely functional, my muscles as limp as gelatin. Using the bed frame, I managed to prop myself up. From that angle, I saw a shadow on the other side of my dorm room door. Legs, motionless, stretching under the frame into my space, backlit by the bright hallway. I called out again, this time more directly. "I can see your shadow, you know." The reply came instantly. "Good." I froze. The voice didn't come from the doorway. It came from everywhere. All around me, as if I jumped into a lake made of sound. I scanned the room, suddenly desperate to find the source. But I was alone. The shadow outside the door remained still. Whether out of courage or sheer stupidity, I launched myself at the door, gripped the handle and flung it open. Nothing. No one was there. I almost laughed. Of course no one was there. Then a slam. A door, further down the hallway. I turned just in time to see a door handle settling back into place. I don't know why, but I chased after it. Maybe it was the alcohol in my system or the fear or some gut instinct. I stumbled forward, catching myself on the wall as I moved toward the door. The walk felt longer than it should have, time and space both distorting. I reached the door. The nameplate read Colby. That didn't make sense. Colby was an international student. No way he came back from break early. I knocked anyway. "Colby? What the hell, man? Open up." I knocked harder, pounding, yelling, "Colby, I know you're in there. Quit messing around." Then suddenly, mid-knock, my hand didn't hit wood. I blinked. When had I closed my eyes? The door was open, but the room inside was mine. That couldn't be. First, our dorm doors auto-lock. You need a keycard to get back in. Second, I looked back down the hallway. My room was still there, second from the end on the left. This room couldn't possibly be mine, and yet, the same posters, my computer, my laundry scattered exactly as I'd left it. Then I saw it, someone curled up in the fetal position in my bed. It looked like me. I should have run. I wanted to run, but the sound of sobbing stopped me. Sobbing that sounded exactly like mine. Against all logic, my legs moved forward. Drunkenly, clumsily, I stumbled toward the bed. The body trembled beneath the covers. My hands shook as I reached out, But before I could lift the blanket, it lifted toward me. The body levitated. It floated upward, straightening out until it was parallel to the ceiling, like a corpse in a coffin. Then it screamed, the kind of scream that shatters bone and ruptures thought. A sound so painful and deep, I covered my ears. But it didn't help. The scream came from everywhere, like the voice before. Then silence. I was crying now. Salty tears or sweat rolled into my mouth. I couldn't tell. Then slam. The body was hurled to the ceiling. The bed, desk, dresser, all flung upward as if gravity reversed. My belongings followed, clothes, books, everything stuck to the ceiling. Except me. And I wasn't waiting to join them. I bolted. The door slammed behind me. I barely made it out before vomiting on the hallway carpet. I felt hollow, drained. But my room, my real room, was just a few doors away. I staggered toward it. Then the hallway lights began shutting off. First at the far end. Then the next. Then the next. Darkness sprinted toward me. I fumbled through my pockets. My ID, where was it? Had I dropped it in that room? The lights shut off faster. Soon I'd be swallowed whole. Then there, my ID crumpled in my back pocket. I swiped, dove inside, slammed the door behind me, and outside my room in that split second before the light vanished, I saw him. He didn't move, but his presence hit me like a punch. His form was impossibly dark, deeper than shadow. His eyes, whiter than anything I had ever seen. Veins of silver spread from his jet-black pupils, betraying the monstrous eternity inside him. The door shut. I stood frozen until I realized the lights in my room were off. I scrambled to the switch, desperate for light, for normalcy. Then I opened my blinds, hoping to see the city lights. But outside my window was my room. Not a reflection. It was identical, as if the window were a door into a copy of my room. And in it, another me. He turned from the window, walked to the desk, poured a drink, and shot it back. Then, the door burst open behind him. A white skeletal hand emerged from smoke-like darkness and seized him. The same silver-veined eyes stared from the dark. The creature tossed the other me to the ceiling, like it had done before. Blood began to drip down as his limbs were snapped and torn from his body like brittle twigs. His scalp was ripped away. Slashes tore through his clothes and into his flesh. He screamed, silently, behind the glass. Finally, the skeletal hand carved through his neck. His head, my head, dropped, rolled, and stopped, staring at me. I slammed the blinds shut. Panting, barefoot, wearing only sleep shorts, I ran for the elevator. Pressed the button. Ground floor. The elevator moved. Ding. The doors opened back to my floor. I tried again. Same result. From the hallway, I saw it, the lights shutting off. Again. It knew I'd left. I ran. Turned the corner. Found the stairwell. I flew down the stairs. 8 floors. 5 flights down. My heart was pounding. 6. I was crying again, but hopeful. 7. No door. Just concrete. I climbed back up. No door there either. I descended again. To the basement. Still nothing. No exit. Collapsed on the stairs. Overwhelmed. And then the lights above me started going out one by one. I didn't move. I was done running. The lights stopped. 2 flights above me. Then, a white skeletal hand reached around the railing, holding my severed head. At that moment, a door slammed open in front of me. A way out. I lunged for it. The darkness let out a roar, deeper than thunder, louder than a fire engine. As I burst through into the ground floor lobby, I didn't stop running. I passed the empty vending machines, the RA board, the security guard's desk. Hey, you can't go outside like that. I didn't care. Out the doors, expecting snow but finding only cold pavement. The storm was gone. I ran to the quad. The stairs leading to the library were icy, but I climbed them slowly, each step heavier than the last. My legs gave out on the final one. The chapel bells rang. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 a.m. Where had the night gone? I passed out. When I awoke, sunlight stabbed at my eyes. The chapel clock read 8:11 a.m. Snow fell gently around me. It was Christmas. I had to go back. I was freezing. I trudged toward the dorms. Sure, I'd get hypothermia, but deep inside, I knew it was over. Back inside, I avoided the security guard's gaze. Took the elevator. 8th floor. Everything looked normal. No shadows. No flickering lights. I swiped my ID and opened the door to my room. Exactly how I had left it. The first thing I did was grab the bottle of whiskey hidden in the bottom drawer of my desk. I carried it into the bathroom and poured every drop down the drain. Then, I turned on the shower and stood under the hot water for what felt like forever, letting it wash away the fear, the sweat, and maybe even a little of the memory. I spent the rest of the day as if nothing had happened. I slept a bit more, ate breakfast, went to the gym, watched TV in the common area. That evening, I even made it to a Christmas market downtown. Still, a part of me dreaded returning to my room, half expecting the man in the shadows to be waiting for me. But he wasn't. He didn't return that night or the next. Not the next week or the next month. In fact, I haven't seen him since Christmas Eve of my freshman year. And I've been sober ever since. Things started to look up the following semester. I changed my major and began doing well academically, well enough to make the dean's list. I got involved in theater, writing for campus plays and acting in a few myself. I built a new group of friends and finally began to feel like I had a community, like I belonged. I'm writing this now, just months after graduating college. I start my first full-time job next week and I've moved into my very first apartment. Life is, for the most part, good. Still, every now and then, the temptation creeps back in. A drink at dinner, a night out with friends. But every time I feel that craving swell, I swear I catch a glimpse of him, just out of the corner of my eye, watching, waiting, for me to slip, to make myself vulnerable again. And every time I remember that night, I remember surviving, and I remind myself, I'm okay without it. I never thought I was someone who scared easily. I'm practical, rational. I don't believe in ghosts or monsters or any of that paranormal stuff. Real life is terrifying enough. Disease, violence, accidents. That's what I used to tell myself. But now, I'm not so sure. Started about 2 weeks ago. I've been living alone in this house for nearly 5 years. It's modest and quiet, nestled at the edge of a sleepy neighborhood, just close enough to the woods to hear the wind through the trees at night. Peaceful, or it used to be. The first sign that something was wrong came the night I got home late from work. I walked in, dropped my bag, and immediately felt off. You know that creeping sensation when you're certain someone is watching you? It slithered up the back of my neck and settled into my spine. I told myself it was just fatigue, that a good night's sleep would clear it up. But that night, in bed, I felt the gaze again. Like something hiding in the shadows, just out of sight. I turned on the lamp and scanned the room. Nothing. Just the usual play of shadows across the walls. I managed to drift off, but it was a fitful sleep, plagued by dreams I couldn't quite remember. Each night after, the feeling intensified. One night, I was hovering in that hazy space between sleep and wakefulness when I heard it. The distinct creak of a floorboard just outside my bedroom door. I froze. I live alone. Another creak, closer this time. I grabbed the baseball bat from beside my bed, crept to the door, and yanked it open, heart racing. The hallway was empty. I checked every room, every window, every lock. Nothing. No signs of entry. Just me and my rapidly fraying nerves. Still, I tried to convince myself it was the house settling. Old wood. Cold nights. But then, about a week later, everything changed. I was eating dinner in front of the TV when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a door closing upstairs. Not a creak. Not a thud. A click. Like someone gently, deliberately shutting a door. I stopped mid-bite and stared at the ceiling. Someone was in the house. I grabbed the bat again and crept upstairs. At the top, I noticed something chilling. The door to the guest room, the one I never use, was ajar. I know I'd closed it earlier. Holding my breath, I nudged it open with the bat. The hinges groaned. Nothing. The room was empty. But then I saw it. In the far corner, near the window, a patch of disturbed dust. Like someone had stood there. Recently, I checked the window. Locked. From the inside. I backed out, shut the door, and barricaded myself in my room. I didn't sleep. Every creak, every gust of wind, made me jump. I thought I could hear footsteps in the hallway. The next day, I chalked it up to stress. Sleep deprivation. A trick of the mind. Until the whispering started. At first, I thought it was the wind. A soft hiss sneaking through the cracks of the old house. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. It was a voice. Low. Murmuring. Just out of reach. I followed the sound down the hallway to the closet. As I approached, the whispering stopped. Silence pressed in, suffocating. I stood there, hand on the doorknob. And then I opened it. Inside, tucked into the wall, was a small door I'd never noticed before. Just large enough for a person to crawl through. It was slightly ajar. My gut screamed to close it and walk away. But I couldn't. I fetched my flashlight, took a deep breath, and opened it. A narrow crawl space stretched into darkness. I shone the light inside. Handprints, faint and dusty, dragging deeper into the space. And then I saw it. Something moved. A hunched figure. Pale. Emaciated. Its limbs bent in ways no human body should bend. It stared at me with wide, empty eyes. Its mouth curled into a grotesque grin. I dropped the flashlight and stumbled back as it began to crawl toward me, twitching like a puppet on tangled strings. I slammed the door shut and bolted from the house, barefoot and breathless, heart hammering like it would shatter my ribs. The police found nothing. No crawl space, no figure, no prints. They looked at me with polite concern, asked if I was under stress, if I'd been sleeping. But I know what I saw. There's something in that house. Something old. Something hungry. And it's still there. Waiting. I don't stay home alone anymore. I've never been the kind of person to believe in ghosts or demons. I flinch at sudden noises like anyone else. And sure, I've had my fair share of nights where I leave the nightlight on or crash in my parents' room after watching a scary movie. But nothing too out of the ordinary. I'm not religious either. I don't attend Sunday Mass or carry a rosary in my pocket. But my family, they're a different story entirely. We're a superstitious bunch, and I suppose it stems from the years we all lived under one roof. My extended family crammed into my maternal grandmother's house. She moved from the province to the city when she was younger and brought every folk belief and old tale with her. We respected our elders to a fault. If they said it, we followed it. That's just how our culture works. Of course, generational gaps brought tension, my more progressive mindset clashing with old-school beliefs, but we were close. Still are. Growing up, I always thought the superstitions were a little silly. Things like, did you go straight home after attending a wake? Or, a man's coming if someone drops a fork during dinner. They felt harmless. Annoying at times, sure, but they put everyone at ease. So I followed them out of habit, out of love. But after what happened that night, all my skepticism evaporated. We moved out of my grandmother's place a few years back and into a small single-story apartment in my dad's old neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, 1 cramped bathroom, and a combined living, dining, and kitchen space. It wasn't much, but after living with 15 people for years, the quiet was welcome. Felt like breathing room. The best part? Our own parking garage. No car to put in it since we couldn't afford one, but it made a good space for drying laundry or squeezing in a workout. The garage was gated with solid metal, secured with a heavy-duty lock my dad insisted on buying despite the cost. Worth it for peace of mind, he always said. We knew our landlord. She'd been childhood friends with my father. In exchange for lower rent, she asked if we could install a security camera in our garage. There had been some thefts in the area, and since our unit faced the street, the camera could help monitor traffic. All we had to do was keep the monitor on in our living room. Seemed fair enough. At the time, I was a college student working on my final thesis. I couldn't afford distractions, so while my family went out one evening, I stayed behind to work. They were reluctant to leave me alone, of course. My dad gave me the usual safety lecture. Lock the doors, draw the curtains, don't answer the gate, and only accept deliveries paid online, never in person. They took both spare keys with them. I settled on the couch with my laptop, hunched over, and got to work on my revisions. Hours passed. I didn't even realize how long I'd been at it until my stomach growled and my back started to ache. I glanced at the time. 2 hours had flown by. I debated ordering food, but I was so close to finishing that I decided to power through a little longer. And then, a knock at the front door. Piwi, Kang Pumasak? The voice was soft, sweet, young and polite. It was in our native language, roughly meaning, "May I come in?" I blinked, disoriented from staring at the screen for so long. My lips parted to respond instinctively, until something in my brain finally clicked. I froze. Another knock. "Hello, pa? Puipa? Akang Pumasak." The voice was closer now, more insistent, but still polite. Sounded so gentle, so kind, almost inviting. My eyes snapped to the monitor beside me. The gate was still closed, still chained shut with the thick metal lock my father swore by. And the space in front of the door, the space where that voice was coming from, was empty. The camera didn't show anyone. No one was there. Another knock. Louder this time. "Piwipa? Akang Pumasak?" That's when I remembered something. Something my grandmother had once said in passing. A quirk of belief I'd always brushed off. Never invite in what you can't see. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the monitor and listened as the knocking continued. Steady, patient. The voice kept asking to come inside, each time a little more insistent, a little more desperate. And still, no one was there. Eventually, the knocking stopped. The voice fell silent. I never opened the door. My family came home an hour later to find me pale and trembling. I told them what happened. My dad checked the monitor history. Nothing. The footage was clean. No sound. No movement. No voice. Like it had never happened. But I know it did. I don't stay home alone anymore. And I never, ever, answer the door if I can't see who's there. Tao. My grandmother had a strange habit. Before stepping into any house, even her own, she would knock on the doorframe, tap the wood twice and say softly, "Tao." It means, "I'm a human." As a child, I thought it was silly. Of course you're a human. Why announce it? But people did. Every visitor, every relative, every neighbor. They'd pause at the threshold, knock, and murmur "Tao," with a questioning tone. It was like a ritual, one I never quite understood. When I finally asked, my grandmother sat me on her lap and explained. She said long ago, before we had locks and alarms, all people had were doors. Doors kept them safe from wild animals, from things that weren't human. But sometimes even doors weren't enough. Sometimes in the night there would be scratching, knocking, and the people inside could never be sure. Was it a friendly neighbor or something else? "So we say it," she told me. "Tao. So they know we are human. So what waits behind the door knows it too." The first time I noticed something was off, I didn't think much of it. It was quiet. Too quiet. No knock. No Tao. Just a voice. "Piwi Poeakong Pumasak," it sang. A lilting, syrupy tone. I didn't recognize the language, but my skin crawled. The voice came again. Higher this time, sickly sweet, almost playful. I froze. Usually, guests would call out "Tao" before entering. That familiar, almost soothing sound. This wasn't that. The absence of that single word filled me with dread. Then came the knocks. Loud, violent, bang, bang, bang. They weren't knocks, really. It was as if fists were slamming into the wood, testing the hinges. "Piwi Poeakong Pumasak." The voice called again, still polite, but sharper, harder. I checked the footage on my door camera. Nothing. No one there. But I could hear it. I could feel it. Tears prickled my eyes as the voice rose into a shriek. "Pw. Poeakong Pumasak." Couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. I pressed my hand over my mouth and sank behind the couch, praying it would stop. Didn't. The pounding intensified. Bang, bang, bang. The wood cracked. The hinges groaned. Something was going to get in. I bolted. ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, locked it, shoved everything I could find in front of it. Silence. Then tap, tap, tap. From the bedroom window. No voice this time, just the soft, deliberate knock of knuckles on glass. I buried myself beneath the blankets, shaking, ears covered, begging it to stop. Didn't. Tap, tap, tap. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember my parents finding me hours later, curled up and sobbing. They didn't ask questions. They didn't mock me or dismiss it. They let me and my little brothers sleep in their room for the rest of the month. And later, they told me something that made my blood run cold. When they got home, they were angry, ready to scold me, because when they went to unlock the front door, the key didn't click. It was already unlocked. Living alone is supposed to be peaceful. That's what I wanted. No roommates, no noisy neighbors, just quiet. First, it was perfect. A small house on the edge of town. Evenings spent watching the sunset over the woods. Just me and silence. But I was wrong. It started small, barely noticeable. A soft scratching on the walls late at night. Mice, I thought. Maybe birds. But it got worse. Tapping. Rhythmic. Intentional. Always at 11:30 p.m. Tap, tap, tap. Behind the headboard. Then the living room. The kitchen. It followed me from room to room. I called an exterminator. Nothing. No signs of pests. Then a contractor. No structural issues. Still, it continued. One night, I lost it. Grabbed a hammer and banged on the wall. Stop, I yelled. And it did. For a moment. Then, thud. A heavy, slow pound. From inside the wall. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch all night, hammer in hand, heart in my throat. Then came the whispers. Started with my name. So faint I thought I imagined it. But one night, as I leaned closer to the wall, I heard, "Come here." I ran. Slept at a motel. The next day, I returned to find long, claw-like scratches tearing through the living room wall. And the noises haven't stopped. Every night. Tapping, scraping, whispers. Whatever's behind the walls. It's not just noise anymore. It's waiting.